culture. The second thing that I've heard today I want to take some disagreement with is that the visual is less important. This is a kind of standard trope in NetSpeak. You hear this all the time, and I think I actually disagree with that. I don't think the visual is any less important than it's been before, and I don't think the visual photographic is any less important than it's been before. Any engagement with a computer screen involves some form of aesthetic engagement. If aesthetics is an embodied experience, we are all deeply engaged in aesthetic experiences when we work online with images. And that seems to me to be, maybe the aesthetic has become a much more intense experience, a much more interactivity has driven a more intense aesthetic engagement than previously. So I'm very, very suspicious of this kind of net trope that the visual is less important. And the third thing that I just want to highlight, which again might frame this discussion, is the idea of something new having happened. One of the ways of talking about the digital is to talk about it as a kind of paradigm shift, that somewhere, at some point in the 80s or the 90s, there was this big transition towards the digital, and I'm afraid to say I've said that a few times in public as well. Increasingly, I'm of the opinion that it's not a paradigm shift. It's what I like to use is a kind of intensification of processes that were already in place. So when I hear the discussion today about the attention economy, for example, that was there in the 1950s when advertising was introduced into television, for example. So I'm beginning to think much more in process of transition. You probably got that sense from the paper that I delivered this morning. That piece of research was a very deliberate interrogation, I think, for me, into thinking less about a paradigm shift and thinking more about certain kinds of continuities as well as changes in the way that images operate. So those are my three slightly skeptical comments. So actually, I don't think we should be unthinking photography. I think that's a mistake.
Why is Katrina not here? Has anyone else got some kind of immediate observation in response to this morning, John?
Anybody to respond to? Yeah, okay. I'll respond to the obvious one. You talked about there about the visual, and I don't disagree with you. I'm not for 1 minute suggesting, as I think I hopefully put across, that the visual is important. I just think that there is something else happening, and I think for me personally, I find the visual to be something which I'm constantly passing over, and to refer back to, I'm probably going to badly misquote him, but Victor Bergin said something about the disease of image, and that after a while you move on from it. So you look at an image for a certain amount of time and you move on. And I think it's the move that I'm interested in, that reason why you might move on from an image. And also the obverse of the image, so the other side of that, which isn't the visual, which is all the other processes that are going on. And that, again, that's why I was kind of invoking Marx a little bit about the idea that it's something which is happening beneath the surface. So I don't discount that there is visual, and we all will sit down and look through books and look at our Instagram feeds visually, but I think there is something else that's happening that goes underneath that, which I think is underexplored. So that will be my kind of riposte to that. Maybe a bad one, maybe still hit the target. But potentially. I think in terms of new things happening, I think there is I think there has been a change, and I just speak from that in terms of just the analog to digital. And I think again it's that McLuhan point of fish don't know anything about water because they're immersed in it. And I think it is quite difficult for us to sense the change because I think we're kind of living in the change. So maybe it will take criticism and theory of the future to kind of reappraise where we are. I know what you mean about it being more transitional and intense, but I do think there are some actual different things going on that are very different from how it was certainly in the 80s and 90s in terms of photography and in terms of the digital subject. My kids are just always on their phone. I never was on my phone when I was young. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
I'm not sure if we need the mic,
Hey, thank you for
Exactly the point I was thinking. I've done a lot of work with camera obscuras. I've built my own camera obscura, shown it to people, and people go in it and they see something that isn't you, but it completely blows their minds. They come out grinning like crazy because I don't know what I mean. It's like a smile machine. It's not a camera. But what I find fascinating about that is the camera obscura changed the way that this is the Hockney-Falco thesis, but changed the way that we see the world, because then suddenly we're seeing it flat, although they are seeing it flat for the first time. The world was never seen as a two-dimensional thing, maybe, before that point. And so that then changed everything, changed our perception. So there's this technology of seeing and perceiving does radically change the way that it reprograms us in the way that we experience the world. And that, and as from an artist, that's our territory, how we experience the world, and changing perceptions on the world, or fucking with people's brains, is no way of putting it. But yeah, so completely.
I think, sorry if I can sort of add something specifically about the man with the movie camera, and specifically about the work I put into that slide, which became sort of like, I got the YouTube video and I sat there and I kind of thought, oh, now I'm going to take some frames. Do I do this kind of just arbitrarily, or do I sit there and systematically go through? And there was definitely a process where at one point I was looking at image, so at one point there was a visual thing, and then the next point I was just random thing, and then I'd used Photoshop to create the contact sheet to pull that all together, and of course I didn't have enough images, so I started again, and suddenly I was just kind of interested in the process, not the image. And then finally I was kind of interested in the amalgamation of all the images flattened out. So I don't know whether that kind of speaks to an artistic practice, but it was quite good fun, and that's why it was one of the few slides that I had to show. The other ones were screenshots from movies. But,
I'd like to kind of throw it back out to the audience just a little bit. I think picking up on those points is